Good morning, everybody. We're going to jump into our first sprint right away. Unfortunately, things have been a little bit crazy this morning, but that's all right. We're going to get into it. Good morning. Yeah, I'm apologize everybody for being late. I have jumped into a sprint, so I'll keep this short. But I ended up having to take my kids to school this morning, and when I do that, I always get back. I always get back late. And then a bunch of other stuff popped up this morning. So, but we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna clear my plate, and I'm gonna get into drafting. I'm excited for it. I'm excited for where I left off yesterday. So, yeah, and yeah, I'll happy to answer that question at the next break. All right, let's get to it. All right, folks. So that was sprint number 1. Well, how'd it go? How'd your sprint go? I got some things done, which I'm happy about. And I am excited to move into sprint number 2. But before that, we have something to discuss. Which I think is a fairly common experience. So Alp says, I started reading The Emotional Craft of Fiction yesterday, and I feel overwhelmed, demoralized. How do you handle that feeling? So this really comes back to one of the strangest phenomenon that I have observed in writing, which is that we constantly fluctuate between feeling good about our writing and feeling like it's not up to snuff, right? And in my opinion, it has to do with the very nature of skill acquisition, right? So, normally, what you do when you acquire a skill is you start practicing the skill, and then you say, okay, I am getting better at this skill. And then every once in a while, you'll pause and you'll look around and be like, how am I doing it compared to other people, right? And if I were learning how to make tacos, right? If I was learning how to cook, I would take some time. I would work on my craft. I would practice my recipes, and I would taste the food that I get as a result, and I would say, okay, how good is it? Is it good, right? And naturally, what I would do is I would suit everything to my own tastes. But then, as I serve food to other people, they tell me whether it's good or bad, right? They give me feedback. Because food is ultimately subjective. Things that some people really like, other people just don't like. Okay? So, I'm going to look around and I'm going to say, oh man, am I good? Am I not good? Right? But typically when I look around at my surroundings, I'm going to be comparing myself against people who are at the same level as I am, amateur cooks, or are worse cooks than me, right? Imagine if, as you were learning to cook, you ate all of your meals at a Michelin restaurant, right? A Michelin-starred restaurant. My assumption is that that would be incredibly demoralizing for you as you are engaging with the best chefs in the world and you are comparing yourself against them. The amount of time and energy and effort they have put into their craft, the quality of their ingredients, the amount of help that they have in the kitchen, because the thing about every Michelin chef is that they have a million sous chefs and a million kitchen helpers and whatever. Whereas you just have you, right? And so as you engage in learning this craft and you compare yourself to others, like you're going to get a very different results when you compare yourself to a short order cook versus comparing yourself to, your mom's cooking or your coworkers cooking, as compared to comparing yourself to a professional chef, right? But the thing about writing is that we all have access all the time to the best books in the world, the best writers in the world. And the unfortunate truth is that as we write, we tend to compare ourselves to the best writers in the world. And so I can understand that, and I've had this experience many times. In fact, reading, nothing has made me more disgusted with my own writing than reading Donald Moss. Because not only is his writing exquisite, but he points to, very effectively, he points to a type of writing that is genuinely soul capturing, right? This is the curse of learning a skill in community with other people. Now, comparison can steal your joy. It can make you very frustrated. It can, just sort of rob you of that. It can rob you of that sense of achievement that you have. But at the same time, it can also light the fire in you to push you forward. Donald Moss, his last name is spelled Maass. That's the thing, is if you don't compare, you don't improve. Right? That's exactly it. So we have this balance of working hard at our craft to improve, and then every once in a while we take a breath and we look around and we go, oh, I am not there yet. Right? So I follow a couple of principles in my life, and they are super helpful to me. The first is ruthless honesty. Okay? The closer my perception of reality is to actual reality, the better off I am. And so I try to be ruthlessly honest about myself and about my circumstances and about other people. Okay? Just absolute, brutal, ruthless honesty. I want to be as close to reality as possible, right? I try not to sugarcoat anything. I try to be as frank and clear, as painfully clear as I possibly can about all circumstances. Because I need to know if my writing is good or if it's bad, right? I need to know what is good enough and what can be improved and what should be improved and what I should not worry about. So, ruthless honesty is the first thing. The second thing, though, is aggressive humility. I just assume that I am wrong most of the time. I assume that I don't have all of the information. I assume that I'm not as good as I think I am. I assume that other people are better than me, right? They're better at whatever it is. I assume that they have information that I need. And so I can be aggressively humble in the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of reality, right? So again, first, ruthless honesty. I want to be hyper clear about everything. The second is aggressive humility. I'm going to just operate under the assumption that other people are better at things than I am, and they have more information than I do, and that I can learn something from them, always. The third is relentless improvement, right? And this is, for me, what has helped me work through the challenge of reading these books and just getting totally demoralized, right? Now, obviously, if I'm being hyper clear, if I'm being ruthlessly honest about how my writing is and how their writing is, and if I'm being aggressively humble, I don't have as many of those feelings of discontent because I'm just assuming that the gap between my writing and their writing is already there. And then relentless improvement says, I am just going to get better all the time. I'm going to constantly improve my life. I'm going to constantly improve my writing. I'm going to always work on moving forward, even if it's only a couple of inches, right? I'm just not going to stop. I am the immortal snail coming to get you, right? I will get you eventually. Given infinite time, I will run you down. And then the last but not least, we have sacrificial kindness. Because those first three things I have practiced for a really long time, and I discovered that they make you a hyper efficient and scary person. And you do not become a good person by pursuing those things. Ruthless honesty and aggressive humility and relentless improvement turn you into a bit of a monster. And that can be good, but that doesn't make you a good person. And so sacrificial kindness is the last piece of it that allows me to take these other three principles and apply them well, right? So that's the system, that like the base system that I use for making sure that I'm constantly able to move forward, right? That I'm constantly able to accept critique and apply it well to what I'm doing. That when I read these books and I do get demoralized, I have the fortitude to take a deep breath and say, okay, cool. What's one thing I can improve? How do I get 1% better towards this direction that I'm now seeing? How do I accept the reality of my situation and move forward inside of it? And how can I be sacrificially kind to myself in this process, right? How do I give myself grace and recognize that, yeah, I'm not there yet, but I will get there, and it's okay if it takes time. So that's sort of what I do. That's how I think about it. I definitely have felt that pretty much every time I pick up a book about writing. I'm like, man, I suck as a writer. I'm really bad. Yeah, it is. You know, Al, that's a good point. When you're getting feedback from somebody, it's a lot easier to ask that question, but you do have to just ask that question of yourself. Okay, I'm reading this text and I'm getting a little bit depressed because my books don't do any of this stuff, right? I read The Emotional Craft of Fiction and I was like, oh, I have cardboard cutouts for my characters. Every single one of my characters is just a cardboard cutout. And then I had to ask myself that question. Okay, based on what I'm reading, based on where my writing is, what's one thing I can do to improve my writing and move in this direction? Right? You just have to ask the question of yourself. And you can ask the question of the author. You can ask the question of the book. You read through the book and you say, okay, cool, let me break this down. Let me highlight each of the individual things that I'm being told make up a good character, and round out the emotion of the character. How do I capture that in my own writing? So anyway, I hope that it is helpful. I empathize with you. I am right there. I often will just try to read my own writing or come across a comment and be like, man, I just kind of suck as a writer. But that's okay, because we can get better. And eventually I will write a perfect book. It's going to happen. Mark my words. All right. Speaking of writing a perfect book, we do have to jump into another sprint. Unfortunately, I'm not writing quite yet, but I'm getting there. And I am going to turn off the music for this sprint because I actually have to jump into a meeting super quick, but I don't want to get off stream. So give me a second, or we're going to jump into a sprint. I'm going to have my meeting. Hopefully it'll be quick. And then, you know what? That's not going to work. You know what? It's not going to work. I'm very sorry, folks. I do have to have this meeting, and so I might actually have to just jump out of the sprints today. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to swing it. That sucks. Okay, I'm going to answer this question, though, first. Alp asks, how do you practice... Am I pronouncing your name correctly, by the way? I should have asked you that like a million years ago because you've been hanging out forever. Is that how I pronounce your name? How do I practice sacrificial kindness towards myself? So, kindness is very important. Sweet. Awesome. Kindness is very important, though. Kindness is not niceness. I just need to clear that up right now as far as the definition. We're not talking about being nice to yourself. Sometimes the kind thing to do is amputate. When someone is wounded, let's say an arm or a leg, and you're there, and their wound gets infected, or let's say their leg is trapped under a boulder, and you cannot move the boulder. Sometimes the kind thing to do, like the nice thing to do, would be to make them as comfortable as possible for as long as possible. That would be the nice thing to do. But the kind thing to do would be to amputate their leg so that they don't die and then carry them to safety. That is the kind thing to do. And so I think when we talk about kindness, especially kindness to ourselves, we cannot confuse it with niceness. How do we decide what's kind and what's not? Well, that's where ruthless honesty comes in. We just have to be very clear about the reality of the situation and what will happen if we make each choice. Sacrificial kindness says that I am going to give of myself and my desires for your sake or for the sake of the other. So the question then becomes, how am I sacrificially kind to myself? How do I practice sacrificial kindness in a way that allows me to make the best possible decision for myself while also bearing the weight of that decision? Well, what it means is being willing to give up my desires, the things I want, for my own good. And sometimes we can't do that. And it's especially hard to do if you are in relentless improvement mode. It's very hard to do. Because if I'm going to try and relentlessly improve, then often what that means is I'm going to just burn myself out trying to achieve whatever I'm trying to achieve. Sacrificial kindness says, no, I'm going to slow down when it's necessary. I'm going to prioritize the things that are actually important in my life, like my relationship with my wife and my kids, over striving relentlessly, eternally to being a better writer, making more money, growing my businesses, right? I could spend all my time and all my energy doing those things. And when you follow something like this process of ruthless honesty, aggressive humility, and relentless improvement, like I said, it makes you a bit of a monster. Because your whole being begins to orient around moving forward. It begins to orient around assessing the bare reality of everything around you, acquiring as much information as possible, and then using it to your advantage to move forward. right? It's incredibly effective, but it's also damaging, or it can be damaging to the relationships around you, like the relationships you have. It can be damaging to yourself. But sacrificial kindness is a way of reorienting those drives and reorienting your desires into seeking good for yourself and for others at all times, right? This is it's based on the Christian concept of dying to the self, right? And this isn't precisely unique to Christianity, but the way I practice it is as closely mirrored to the way Jesus teaches it as possible, because I'm a Christian. So the idea is that I have desires that I'm constantly like just trying to achieve, right? I desire all of these different things, but those desires often get in the way of actual good. They often get in the way of what is best for me and what is best for other people. And so the mortification of the flesh, or dying to my own desires, that's what the sacrificial part of sacrificial kindness is. And orienting myself outwardly so that I'm not just focused on what I want and what's good for me, right? To put it very bluntly, sort of a vulgar way to talk about this is vulgar in the classical sense, not in the current sense. But to put it bluntly, like, I get on stream because, in part, I want to see as many other people writing as possible. I want to see other people writing books, right? It would be way more efficient for me to just never run the stream and to just grind my writing sessions myself. Because when I'm not on the stream and I'm not taking breaks in between sprints, I can just write for 5 hours, right? I'm much more likely to get into flow. I'm much more likely to be able to do what I'm trying to do. But it is helpful to other people. It is good for me to see that there are others striving. It's not good for me to be so wrapped up in my own writing and my own experience that I'm not engaging with other people. Other writers have blessed me tremendously. They've given me so much information, and they have taught me so much about writing, about the business of writing. You know, everything I know is through, I've gotten through experience or other people, right? And so this is a way, even though it makes me less efficient, even though it gets in the way of my relentless improvement, it's a way for me to be others oriented, right? And so that's what sacrificial kindness is. Sacrificial kindness is killing my own desires to seek the greatest good for other people and for myself. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, exactly. Writing sprints they're wonderful to do with other people. Body doubling is just such a great way to ensure that we get work in. CV, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I benefited from so many of those kinds of things, right? I benefited from so many people in the community seeking my good. And so I'm hoping to continue that culture. I'm hoping that, you know, as all of you continue writing your books and become proficient and adept at, you master your craft, I'm hoping that you're going to do the same thing, that you're going to gather other writers around you and you're going to teach them and you're going to show them how this works. Because I think that ultimately you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. And that is, that was the 20 books to 50K like slogan for a long time. And I think it's just absolutely true. When we work together, we all benefit. I benefit from these streams. Everybody else benefits from these streams. I think it's a great thing. Good morning. Good morning, EA. Yeah, you know, it is, sacrificial kindness is the way that we make the improvement matrix sustainable. That is a very good call out. All right, technical question. In writing combat, I sometimes notice that writing impact first makes it read better, or am I imagining it? Like if your character is an archer, describing an arrow sailing forward might not be the best thing to do. Yeah, so actually, that has a lot to do with the pacing of what you're trying to achieve. Every word you add in an action scene slows the pacing down. And reduces the sort of impact of it. And so you have to be careful that you're not just sort of padding out your action scenes, because the reality is that in real life, action happens like in the blink of an eye. And so the moment like is there and then it's gone. And people can think about it after the fact, but it's usually like when we read about action, sometimes it takes pages and pages and pages because they're describing every little thing. And every little thing isn't actually important, right? So I would suggest that if you're practicing your writing, write your scene and then read back through it and ask yourself the question, would I get bored at any point during this fight if I was just reading this off the shelf? And if so, start cutting. That'd be my recommendation. Yeah, that's the other thing is that, Mark, good call. You want to make sure that you are not just repeating information ad nauseum. That is the mark of an amateur writer, is that they just repeat the same information over and over again. I don't need to know every time my character swings a sword. I don't need to know every time they do their fancy move and something cool happens. I don't need you to describe it every time. In fact, you should describe it less and less and less and less as time goes on, because the reader already knows what's going on, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's very true, Aaron. The speed at which we articulate something is so much slower than the speed at which it actually happens. All right. So, I think you're all wonderful and super great. And I now have to go to a meeting. And I'm very sorry. This morning we started late and we're ending early, and I'm very sorry. Things have just this whole day has been upended. Which stinks, because I need to get some writing in. And I will. Yeah. I don't like it. All right. But I will be back tomorrow, and I hope to get a full day of sprints in tomorrow. So, thank you all for hanging out. Thanks for these conversations, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep doing some sprints. There is a sprint channel, just so you guys know. In Nova Via, there is, in the Endless Worlds Discord channel, there's actually a writing room, and you can sprint there. Just so you know. So if you go log in, you can totally just run sprints. There's a bot in there, and if you type /sprint, it'll start sprints, and you can join them and track your word counts and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'll show how to do that sometime, because that's also a great place to just jump in and start writing sprints. You don't have the video, but you can track via Discord. So anyway, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you later. Thanks, everybody.